I think the opportunities that I have in Japan only exist here.
Hi, welcome to the Black Experience Japan's Melanated Files. The purpose of this series is to highlight the black people living in Japan. Who are they?
My name is John Ealey. I'm from Chicago in the States, and I've been here in Japan for about 10 years. I'm a video producer. My main job is arranging for crews, managing budgets, doing location scouting for productions that want to shoot in Japan, so mainly foreign productions. This year, my biggest projects were a shoot for IBM, a documentary, a short film for Gucci, a short film for Kenzo, and I just finished a photo shoot for a charity book for Dior about 2 or 3 weeks ago. My company was a child company of a Japanese production company. I had been working for that company as a translator and interpreter and production assistant for a couple of years, and then a friend of mine from university moved back to Japan, and so we discussed with my parent company about making a new company that focuses on foreign productions. And so they helped us make that company along with a third partner, a Japanese partner. And we've been doing that for about the last year, and the business went really, really well. We got lucky with a lot of big clients, so we decided to become independent, and we all invested our money into the company and started this proper Japanese company. And so we're just managing a lot of productions, and right now we're kind of deciding how we want to grow. Primarily, we get clients that contact us from overseas, and then we arrange shoots for them. But business-wise, that just involves us waiting a lot. So now we need to think about how do we go and pursue business. So maybe working with directors in Japan and pitching their projects to online magazines like Vice and ID and other sorts of kind of creative endeavors. So our company is called Bento Labs. We're a production management company, and now we're moving more into the creative side as well. Primarily a production company from overseas has a client like Apple or Gucci or Kenzo, and they want to produce something in Japan. So they contact us, and we do the location scouting. We figure out what the budget is going to be for the production here. We put together the crews. We manage pretty much anything that they need to produce here, because those producers overseas don't know Japan, they don't have any connections, so they need us to manage the shoot here. So any production that's being shot overseas ends up having like 3 layers. You have the client, you have the production company in that country, and then you have us here in Japan managing the shoot. I think the opportunities that I have in Japan only exist here for me. As a person who speaks fluent Japanese and English and some Spanish and French, my skill as a producer translates in the US, but I feel like my language abilities wouldn't be as appreciated, so I would just be another producer. So here I have a really unique market because I know Japan well, I speak the language, and then I'm an English speaker, so I can connect with clients from other countries. So it's a really unique position. There are a lot of other production companies that are run by foreigners, but what's unique for us is that we're connected to a really large Japanese production company, so we have access to all of their producers, all of their experience. We have a team of researchers. We're in a really unique position, which a lot of other companies don't have, which is really nice and convenient for us, and we can rent from all of the best rental companies. So we have a lot of access, and we have a lot of local connections that has been really fortunate for us and gives us a lot of unique abilities. You know, what I like most about Japan is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I love how clean and safe and convenient and easy it is to live here. But at the same time, being an American and seeing a lot of the social issues happening in the US and overseas, it feels like we're living in a bit of a bubble. And so I want to be able to be involved in helping my community in the US, specifically Black Americans, and then I'm also really interested in world affairs. So I'm interested in what's happening with nationalism spreading all over Europe and things like that. And from Japan, it's really easy to kind of avoid and ignore those things and to not get involved, because superficially, the society is very comfortable and in a really good position. Economically, things aren't looking so great, but right now we're not really feeling it. So it's like, I love the comfort of living here, but at the same time, I somewhat regret not being able to be more involved with my community overseas. Because we see it happening on social media and everything like that, but you feel very disconnected. Like you want to be involved and to help people and to protest and do all of those things, but you can't really, you can contribute here. It's a question of finding out what you can do here. And like for me, I pay money to all of the campaigns that I believe in the US. Like I try to contribute monetarily. I feel like sharing posts and stuff on Facebook is not so valuable. It's something that we do for ourselves that makes us feel involved and like we're contributing, but the people we share with are the people who already believe in the things that we believe in. So I'm not really convinced that's so valuable, but sending emails to my senators in the US and contributing to campaigns I believe in, like those are things that I'm involved in. And when I was younger, you know, we were only involved in local politics, the people in your state or your city. But now I think in the US at least, we're starting to appreciate how everything is interconnected. So we don't just contribute to personal campaigns, we contribute to campaigns for people all over the country that we want to see, you know, representing us in the Congress. What I like least about Japan, I may be incorrect in this interpretation, but I feel like there's a lack of critical thinking. I had a friend a long time ago who told us about this workshop he went to just so that he could better discuss his own opinions and talk about his favorite music. And he made this diagram of his favorite music so that he knew how to kind of talk about himself when he was in like social situations. And I thought that's very typical of Japan. People don't seem so good at having debates. And when you ask people to give you a really deep thought about why they feel something, it can take a long time or you just kind of never get there. And I mean, people have these thoughts. The inner experience of people here, the emotions here are the same as they are anywhere else in the world, but I think people's ability to connect to those things and to speak in depth about how they feel and why they feel those things is a bit stunted. And I was a teacher in Kyushu for 3 years, and I saw that in the education system. Whereas in my education, it was a lot about debate, and that was my favorite part, reading a book and discussing with our classmates what the possible meanings were, what the character motivations were. But when I was teaching here, there wasn't a lot of discussion. It was very one-sided, so the teacher explains everything to the students, and the students absorb that, and then the tests just make sure that they can accurately recreate whatever the teacher told them. So there's not a lot of discussion. And those skills that we develop when we're young, I feel like they translate into our adult lives and how we interact with the world. And it's definitely true that Westerners and maybe Americans, I can only really speak for Americans, I don't know about other Europeans, but we're very argumentative. But in most cases, I feel like in a positive way. It's not like difficult, it's just being really, being critical. And I like that skill, and I miss that when I'm here. I feel like I have to be really careful not to offend people because any sort of like aggressive questioning of a system here kind of puts people off. I think I had a revelation about my Black experience recently. I couldn't say exactly where it comes from, but I was in a unique program when I was a young kid. My family was really poor, but there was a program in my community that allowed poor children to go to really good schools. And so I went to a really good elementary school with a lot of white students who were really wealthy. And I realized maybe in my early teens that because of that experience, I was a lot different from the rest of my family. Like a lot of my cousins went to school in inner city Chicago, and so they developed a very different personality and kind of different skills. And they used to call me their white cousin when I would go visit. And recently I was talking to some Black friends in Japan, and they were talking about how they had been harassed by the police a number of times and had all these troubles. And in my 10 years in Japan, I've only interacted with the police maybe one time. And it was a very negative experience, but it was only one time in 10 years. Whereas they had these experiences multiple times. So I have a feeling the way I present myself compared to other people makes me pass in some sort of maybe less threatening sense or something. I couldn't say what it is, but I haven't had the same experience that I think some other Black people have had here. So there's definitely some difference in my experience, and I can't say exactly where it came from. But I feel in general that my experience here has been really positive. When I left the States, I was just starting to date. I was like 22, 23, and I was already seeing like the seeds of racism in the dating community. And when looking for jobs, there was that bit of paranoia about how I present myself and things like that. And so when I came here, there's definitely racism here, but it's more stereotyping. And there are a lot of positive stereotypes too that people have here that are in effect, so it's not really all negative. So for me, the experience was, the racism exists, but in Japan, it's more like you're a foreigner or you're either Japanese or you're not. So it's very different from in the States where it's very stratified, and every ethnicity experiences discrimination in very unique ways. And I think within the racism in Japan, there are still hierarchies. I mean, advertising is still, as foreigners go, it's still predominantly white. When I'm looking at casting calls for productions, I'm seeing lots of productions that could be any ethnicity, but they're always asking for white man, white female. So that still exists, but it's not as, I don't know, it's different from the US. The US's racism is a very distinct brand of racism that comes from our really difficult past, whereas Japan is affected by a very abstract, broad kind of racism that exists probably world over, but it's not, they don't have the same history that we have in the States that kind of informs the racism. So I was out walking with a friend near my house, and there was a car accident or something had happened, and we had seen it on our way out to get lunch, and then on the way back we were kind of just seeing what had happened with the accident. So we were just looking around, and there was 2 police officers that were still in the area from the accident, and we were looking at the accident as we walked back to my place, and then the police officer kind of called out to us and asked us kind of what we were doing, and he said something really strange like, oh, it just seemed kind of, you guys were looking kind of oddly. And it's like, okay, but there's an accident, so of course we're looking at the accident, that's not really a big deal. And then he made some weird comment about how there are a lot of gay couples in the area, because we live in Shinjuku. And I thought, okay, even if that were the case, is that relevant? What does that statement even mean? Is that a reason to be called by the police? And so then he asked for my ID, and at this point I had an attitude, because I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm not a fan of the police as a Black American, and in general I feel like worldwide we need to make a lot of changes to that institution, but I gave him my ID. In retrospect, I would say if you were asked for your ID by the police, I wouldn't give it to them, I would show it to them. But once I gave him the ID, he was holding on to it, which kind of held me hostage, because I couldn't really leave without the ID. And then he wanted to check my bag, and I know for a fact that they don't have any right to check into your personal belongings, so I told him no. And I was really insistent on that. And I just knew I had no intention of letting him check my bag. I mean, I didn't have anything in the bag. I had 1 book in the bag, but out of principle, I just thought I'm not gonna deal with this kind of treatment from the police. And I knew that if at some point he was able to check my bag, he would see that there was nothing there. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna waste his time since he's wasting mine. And I was really insistent, and I ended up sitting down on the sidewalk and just wouldn't talk to the police. And at some point he said he was gonna call his manager or something. And I said, please do. I mean, bring all the people you want. You can waste your time, you can waste their time. And I just wouldn't let him check my stuff. And at some point, I think he and his partner just gave up, and they gave me my ID back and let me go. But I felt it was really important to let them know that if you're going to harass citizens who haven't done anything wrong, it's not going to be free. It's going to cost you something. And that left a really negative impression on me, but I also felt fortunate that that was the only time I had to deal with that. And I think if I had to deal with that more frequently in my time in Japan, it would definitely change my attitude about my life here. But then I hear that my other friends have had similar experiences on a more frequent basis, and it makes me, similar to how I feel about living in Japan as opposed to America, I feel a little bit sad that, I feel fortunate that I haven't had that experience, but sad that other people are having that experience, and often wondering what I could do to contribute and make things better for other people that are having those experiences here and back in the States. I guess 2 things come to mind. As a teacher, when I was teaching in Kyushu for my first 3 years in Japan, I think it was my first slight introduction to kind of the racism in Japan, but it was a very innocuous experience. It was more like kids asking how much I knew about basketball. Fortunately, it wasn't as bad as other people where they ask you very personal physical questions and things like that. But it was a good experience to kind of check my ego, because they were children and people who had never even left Kyushu, let alone, the country. And so I had to I had to change my expectations. Like, to be asked those questions in the US wouldn't make any sense. There's absolutely no excuse for it. But here, there's a very different context that changes what you expect of people. And so it was a good experience being asked those questions and learning a different kind of tolerance that is really important when you're traveling overseas and dealing with cultures who have backgrounds that you're not familiar with. The other experience that I guess is funny in a way is dating. Where people think like, they say they've never, been with a black guy, or they've never dated a black guy or something like that, and they think it's kind of a compliment, I guess, but it immediately kind of objectifies you, and it kind of lets you know how they view you as more of like an object in a sense. And I'm sure they have good intentions, but I immediately, even if it's complimentary, I immediately turn down anyone that introduces my ethnicity into a discussion about, our relationship or dating, because I feel like it's not, they're gonna be like a project to get them to a place where they can kind of like appreciate me as a person. And there are a lot of great people out there, and I don't feel the need to for dating to be work. You wanna find people that are a good fit for you from the start and where you are in your life now. And if I'm way past that point of dealing with my ethnicity and dating, so I'm not interested in starting that with anyone. My favorite Japanese food is definitely unagi. I just think it's delicious. And it was one of those foods that I hadn't eaten before when I came here, so I was very kind of intimidated by it. But I think what got me into it was that I'm really into sports and athletics and running and things like that. And so like the premise behind that food is that it's really good for you for energy in the summertime, and it's a stamina food and whatnot. And so I kind of enjoyed the mythos behind the food. And then once I got used to the flavor profiles in Japan, I just realized that it's a really delicious food with a really good balance, and the way it's cooked in Japan is really amazing. And it's incredibly expensive, but when you get the good stuff, it's worth it. So unagi is an eel, and what's interesting is that they can be sourced from Japan, China, Africa. Generally speaking, I couldn't say with certainty, but Japanese people feel that those sourced from Japan are superior quality and flavor. That could just be like a nationalist thing, I don't really know. But the more expensive ones I've had that claim they were sourced from those areas were really delicious, so it's entirely possible. But for Americans, we're not really used to eating eel, or maybe Chicagoans aren't. I don't know, East Coasters might have a more broad variety of seafood, but in Chicago we didn't. So for me, it was a really kind of unusual food that I hadn't really considered in my seafood category. I would say the mantra that has really given me the most success, I think there's a lot of different ways to say it, but the premise is basically, don't get ready, stay ready. And the way that really affected me was this realization that I feel like I've always had a lot of really good luck in my life here with my work experience and the people I've met and the opportunities I've had. And what I realized is that a lot of that comes from being ready. It was studying Japanese really hard when I was living in southern Japan. It was working on my design portfolio before I came to Tokyo and was working as a graphic designer. So it's really thinking about what you want from the future and then preparing yourself for that. And you don't know when that email or that phone call is going to come about that job or that interview that could change your life. But if it comes and you're not ready, you're not going to be able to receive it. So you really have to make that luck for yourself. You have to put yourself in a position to receive that luck by having the skills or having the connections or just being ready to receive the good things that are come. And if you get an opportunity for an interview and you don't have the skills ready, skills that you knew you needed and that you just didn't prepare, it's a regret that sticks with you. And I had that experience where I originally wanted to work in video games in Tokyo, and I spent 3 years in Kyushu kind of dabbling in the skills I needed for that career, and an amazing opportunity came and my portfolio wasn't ready. And it was a really good wake-up call. On one hand, it made me question if this is what my passion really was, because I didn't put in the effort to be prepared, but it also made me realize that whatever I choose to do in the future, there's preparation that goes into it, and that I need to be ready to receive opportunities if they come my way again. Empathy is incredibly important, and it's something that we all need to treat each other better. And you don't have to have shared experiences with people to appreciate what they might be going through. And I think if we spend more time considering how our actions and our words affect other people, we'll all treat each other a lot better. And especially when you are mindful of your own experiences and how they made you feel, and then making a point not to treat people in similar ways. My strongest advice would be to learn Japanese. There are definitely countries where you can get by without Japanese, and if you have high technical qualifications like a master's or PhD in engineering or CS or something like that, then maybe it's not as relevant. But this is definitely a country where the language is important. So it's a worthwhile effort to study the language and to learn it as best you can. And that is where the opportunities come from. I mean, people are kind of effortlessly impressed by you just by having some language ability, and it opens a lot of doors. And a lot of what's come to me came from the effort that I put into learning the language. You can find me on our website, bento-labs.com, and we have an Instagram under the same name. So if you're looking to do any production in Japan or want some advice, you're always welcome to come grab lunch with me, and I'm happy to talk about production.
Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see weekly videos about the Black experience in Japan, feel free to subscribe to this channel. If you know someone that would like to be featured, or if you yourself would like to be featured, send us a message on our Facebook page at The Black Experience Japan, or send us a tweet on Twitter at TheBlackXJP. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.